All right, what's up? What's happening? What's good? What it do, baby? You are tuned in to another edition of the Why Not Us, Why Not Now podcast. It's your boy Xavier, aka X, aka Zay, here with my brother from another, Kory Blackshear, aka KB. What's going on, bro?
Xander, bro.
Man, we are in the thick of things in the NFL season. The NBA season is still in its beginning stages, but it's been hot. And Major League Baseball is officially saying goodbye to 2025 as the awards have been handed out. We will get into that in just a while, but man, we got to begin with what's happening in the world of the NFL. Our worst nightmare has come true. Ladies and gentlemen, I think the New England Patriots are back. They are 9-2 now, winning 27-14 over the New York Jets last night. There were a lot of people that had some things to say, KB, when Robert Kraft decided to fire Gerard Mayo after 1 year and bring in Mike Vrabel. But we who watched the game very carefully, we knew that's probably the right move for him to make. And they have turned this thing around in just 1 year. Drake May is better than any quarterback that Mike Vrabel ever had in Tennessee. And I had a feeling that he would be coming in. I was impressed by Drake May during his first preseason as a rookie last year. And I was wondering why Gerard Mayo didn't start him on day one. All of that stuff doesn't even matter anymore now. I had a chance to watch Drake May up close and personal 4 days ago, five now, 4 days removed from Thursday's game when the Patriots came to Tampa Bay and took on the Bucks in Raymond James Stadium. And I said right then and there, this is the best quarterback from that 2024 draft class. Overall, it's like I don't want to take anything away from Jaden Daniels or Bo Nix and what they did last year, but sports is a what have you done for me lately business. What they were doing last year was 2024. Jaden Daniels hasn't been able to stay healthy this year. We wish him all the best in his recovery. Bo Nix has taken a step back this year statistically. Caleb Williams looks like he's starting to come into his own. I don't know what to say about Michael Penix and JJ McCarthy at this point. We'll have to wait to see them grow. But Drake May kept it going, man. On Thursday, 25 of 34, 281 yards, a touchdown, no turnovers. Travion Henderson is also coming into his own. 3 touchdowns in this game, 5 overall in the past two, where he absolutely gashed Tampa. And I sat there in the press box and I watched it all happen in real time. But this is what we were hoping was not going to end up happening. We were hoping that the Patriots would not end up having a resurgence and we go through another stint of what happened for 2 decades where they just absolutely dominated and kicked everybody's tail. It looks like that's about to happen again for at least a short time, a period, KB. They look like the real deal.
Yeah, and they built their team the right way. You draft Christian Gonzalez, you draft Will Campbell, you draft Drake May, you get a host of free agents that came in. You you see the resurgence of Stephon Diggs' career. Since he's been there now, he is their number one option. But also, you get contributions from guys like Hunter Henry. You get contributions from Travion Henderson, who really I felt like that was the only thing that was a question mark for that Patriots offense. It was their run game, and now they actually have established the run game in the last 2-3 weeks. So now that Ramondre Stevenson has been out, he's got an expanded role, and he's been taking advantage of the expanded role. I think Mike Vrabel was the coach that they needed. I think Gerard Mayo was more of a transitional coach just until they could find the right guy. And you bringing back Mike Vrabel to Foxborough to kind of help kind of steady this rebuild so that they didn't have to have such a rebuild. Because really, like you said, their rebuild was a year. There was no fall off from the time that Belichick was there to the time that Vrabel was there. I mean, the most you could say was there was some uncertainty after Mac Jones' rookie year when he was in Foxborough, but after that, now the Patriots are back. They're back. I'm sorry, not Mac Jones, but my guy Drake May. He's looking like an MVP front runner because right now, as far as my MVP ladder, I still have Jonathan Taylor just because I feel like the offensive year he's had has been ridiculous. But I keep saying Mac Jones. Drake May has shown that he's poised, like from an early age. He's shown that he's poised in the pocket. You can send pressure at him, and he still knows how to move the pocket. He knows how to keep his eyes downfield. He's limited in his turnovers. He's playing perfect football almost right now. With them riding this win streak, I don't know how you can stop the Patriots because their defense isn't a slouch either. So I'm looking at the Patriots. They're gonna go as far as he takes them, and so yeah, I think that it's scary hours for the NFL.
Yeah, they are on an 8-game winning streak right now. They have not lost since week 3 when they lost against the Pittsburgh Steelers back on September 21st. Yeah, it's scary out here. And this is why some of us were campaigning last season too. Hire Mike Vrabel. Hire Mike Vrabel as a head coach. He knows what he's doing. He did not inherit necessarily the best situation in Tennessee, but look at how he turned them around. I want to know what went wrong with the Titans, honestly, because there's no way they should have let that man go out that building. Because look at that organization now, KB. They are a hot mess.
That to me feels like more of a ownership and an organizational problem because he was the right coach for them at that time, and he had to work with Ryan Tannehill being his quarterback. He had to work with Mariota being his quarterback at times. Like he had nothing to work with outside of dominant Derrick Henry, and before he was traded, up and coming AJ Brown. But he didn't have too much to work. He had a host of veterans, but he didn't inherit the best situation, like you said. So the fact that he has won everywhere that he has gone shows that if you put the right team around him, he'll make it happen. But you just have to put the right pieces, and it has to fit what he's trying to run as far as his schemes go. But right now, that's why I see like it's just a match made in heaven for him because he has all the pieces that he wants. You drafted Will Campbell very high in the draft because you looked at it like Drake May is going to be my quarterback of the future. I have to invest in some great blocking for him. I have to keep him healthy in order to thrive in New England. He understood that from early on. And I think that this is what happens when you have poorly run franchises versus franchises that have been there, done that, and know how to win. The Patriots have won for years. The Titans have not. And that just shows you that a change in scenery is sometimes needed.
Yeah, it's amazing how full circle things can go, right? Mike Vrabel's playing career, he was a big part of the early part of the Patriots dynasty. He goes to become the head coach in Tennessee. They basically are responsible for the ending of the Patriots dynasty because that was the last game that Tom Brady played as a Patriot in that wild card round when the Titans knocked them out in Foxborough. And now he's back as the head coach for the resurgence of, I'm not going to say it's going to happen, but what could be another Patriots dynasty that's looming because they got all the right pieces in place there. When it comes down to the New York Jets, I don't have too much to say. I'm surprised they even won against Cleveland on Sunday. That just goes to show you how bad the Browns are. And honestly, KB, I'm surprised that Cleveland didn't at least fire their special teams coach after what happened in week 10.
Yeah, that was bad. But honestly, Cleveland, speaking of Cleveland and the Jets, it's just a mess overall. And I think that, as much as, Justin Fields deserves his, fair share of blame, it is an organizational problem. Like you had Breece Hall basically campaigning on Twitter to be traded. He wanted to be traded. He wanted to go just like Sauce wanted to go, just like Quentin Williams wanted to go. I'm sure that it's an organizational problem at this point because outside of those Rex Ryan years, the Jets have not been able to compete. They have not been good. Even when they got Aaron Rodgers, I didn't have very much expectation. I thought they were going to be, they were going to be able to compete, but I didn't think that they were going to be like championship contenders or maybe not even playoff contenders. Cleveland, on the other hand, they got it all wrong. Kevin Stefanski seems to avoid being fired every week. I'm not sure exactly why. I'm not campaigning for him to be fired, but it's just the message is not getting through. And his willingness to stick with Dylan Gabriel to a fault is the reason why I felt like he should be fired. He has no real reason to, he has nothing to justify the fact that Dylan Gabriel is still playing, because that offense is not the reason why they're in games. The defense is the reason why they're in games. And they got exposed pretty much everywhere on Sunday against the Jets. So, like you said, I'm surprised they won then. I can honestly see a situation where neither one of these teams wins another game this year.
And that probably would be for the best, especially in the case of the Jets, because what we do know is that Justin Fields is not going to be their franchise quarterback going forward. So you need to make sure you're in position if you want to draft one of these quarterbacks coming out in this class. Mendoza looks like the best one so far. Go ahead.
But yeah, that's another thing I was gonna ask. Like who? Like I know you just said Mendoza, but this from what I see in totality is not a very strong draft as far as from the quarterback position. This is not the year that everyone was looking at as going to be a deep quarterback draft. You do have a few pieces, but there are going to be some that I look at more as projects. I say Mendoza is the best one out of the bunch. If you can find a way to bring him in, yes. But it just, from what I've seen, I'm not too sold on a lot of these pieces. I just gotta see how they would fit with that offense and what they're trying to run.
So this actually was supposed to be a deep quarterback year on paper, according to the experts in college football, being spearheaded and led by Arch Manning, Drew Aller, and possibly Carson Beck. As we can see, none of that is going to end up happening.
None of those names, just like you're right. Going into the season, this was supposed to be a loaded draft, but now they were looking at everything. We're like, none of those three names that you, Garrett Nussmeier, Drew Allen, none of these names, especially Drew Allen coming off of a season-ending injury, like none of these names excite me. And I'm just looking at it like, if I'm Arch, somebody has to convince him to stay another year, because this isn't going to be the year that's going to have his draft stock up high. So I'm looking at him. He needs to come back.
The only way he shouldn't come back, in my opinion, is if somehow Minnesota just bottoms out and they end up getting the number one overall pick or a top 3 pick, and they possibly use it on him. And the reason I say that is because Kevin O'Connell is one of those coaches that he can continue to develop upon. Because I don't think J.J. McCarthy is going to end up being the answer in Minnesota, despite what I said at the start of us having our show here today. I don't think J.J. McCarthy is going to end up being the answer. And as much as Justin Jefferson has tried to be the best teammate as possible, you can tell he's getting fed up with what's happening out there. I think Arch could potentially be the answer in Minnesota. But if they don't bottom out this year, could they possibly do it next year? See, that's another reason if I'm Arch, I decide to go back to college, because the Manning family, they are rich in the history of the NFL. They are considered the first family of the NFL to most people for the most part. Why would you want him going to situations like the New York Jets or the Cleveland Browns, where we haven't seen quarterbacks develop at all, at least in our lifetime?
Especially knowing the history of the Manning family and how they influenced Eli to New York. It's just you honestly can see a situation where Arch coming out and being able to dictate where he goes, kind of like what Deion tried to dictate with Shador, but to a higher extent, because you're saying like the influence that the Manning family has on the NFL and everything that goes on as far as like the optics of it. I could see a situation where if the situation doesn't look right, he's going to evaluate all of the options at the end of this season and see who has what pick and where he could possibly fall. And then that would justify him either coming back or trying his luck in the draft and seeing if he can possibly land in a role where he feels like he could develop and grow under the right OC or the right head coach. I could see that.
Arch and the Longhorns at Texas, they will be at UGA this weekend. We'll talk about that in just a short while. But to wrap up this Patriots segment here, I don't know to say that they're all the way back this year because they're so young and they don't have the experience quite yet. But I'm not going to count them out. The AFC is so wide open this year. And the last thing I want to say to this, and this is a message to the Dallas Cowboys fans. You see what Robert Kraft is doing? You see how we don't hear from him very much? You see, the most that we've heard from Robert Kraft this season wasn't even us hearing him. It was them taking a camera and panning it to him and Cardi B being up in the press box together, watching as the Patriots took on the Falcons and Stephon Diggs had just scored a touchdown. That's all we've been asking for Jerry Jones for the past couple of decades now. And I'm not saying that that's the sole reason that Robert Kraft has 6 Super Bowl rings compared to Jerry's 3. But I would like to believe that it helps that your owner isn't providing some form of a distraction out there as you're just trying to navigate through the season.
Exactly. Let the coaches coach. Let them be the ones addressing the media. But we know that's Jerry Jones. That's been Jerry Jones that's it's been his motto and his way for forever. Even in the Jimmy Johnson era of the Cowboys, it's always been Jerry's way. So I don't expect that to change. But yeah, I see what you're saying.
Speaking of things that, we thought were possibly going to lead to a change at some point during the season, but it looks like it's going to remain the same, at least for now, and that would be A.J. Brown and the Philadelphia Eagles. And KB, it has been very vocal around there this week, to say the least. Go ahead, take it away.
So if you weren't aware, during a recent Twitch stream, on I believe Janky Rondo's Twitch stream, he was doing kind of like a collab with AJ Brown. They were playing a Madden game, and basically AJ Brown told him, "If you had me in fantasy, drop me," which just screams more to me that AJ Brown is frustrated. But it's not just the fact that he's frustrated not getting the ball. Everyone wants to feel like they're contributing at some point, and especially a guy who's been one of the top receivers in the NFL. I'm sure he's never been okay with just being a bus rider. He wants to feel like he's the bus driver, but with an offense that has weapons such as Devontae Smith, AJ Brown, Saquon Barkley, the way that they're having to win games is kind of is alarming to me, because they're not sustaining drives. If you watch the Thursday night game, they struggled heavily to move the ball. Not just them, the Green Bay Packers too, but I'm looking at the Philadelphia offense, and with the amount of weapons that they have, the amount of money that they've invested into these options, and that they are struggling to put points on the board. This is the reason why A.J. Brown is upset. I completely understand his frustration, because he has to be expected to be a great teammate while also, not letting his emotions, show that he's frustrated not receiving the ball. Sometimes it feels like he's not getting even the targets. He even made a soundbite where he said something about, y'all shouldn't be praising me for blocking for Saquon. Like, y'all should be praising Saquon for making the guy miss. That just shows me he feels like he's just clocking into almost like a 9-to-5 job, something that he doesn't really get much joy out of, but he's there. He also even said that, I believe I heard Stephen A. Smith speak on this morning, that he didn't even get the full feeling of being a champion that everyone thought that he would get after winning the championship last year. This just shows me that he feels that he is more of a luxury to have than more of a necessity.
Well, yeah, when you have the embarrassment of riches that they have, it's going to be like that sometimes. Devontae Smith, Dallas Goedert, these are elite players that you have out there with you. Saquon Barkley, I believe Jalen Hurts is an elite quarterback. He's shown it too many times this season that he can be. Here's what the alarming part to me about the Philadelphia Eagles is. Their head coach is Nick Sirianni. He was hired there as the offensive coordinator coming away from the Indianapolis Colts. And it's his side of the ball that they cannot get right. But he's nowhere near the hot seat because of what they accomplished last year and because of what they look like this year as well. Record-wise, we see what it is. And them being able to do what they do, it just proves that this is a damn good football team. They know how to go out and win football games. But at some point, because we saw this earlier in the season, we just didn't talk much about it because we were more so looking at how did the other team allow this to happen. Remember when they took on the Los Angeles Rams in week 3? And they end up mounting that huge comeback? I don't know if those teams were to see each other again, if that would be the same result. Because the offense for the Los Angeles Rams right now, it's humming. And it's like, when it really matters, will you be able to beat teams like that? I know we saw it in week 3. Are we going to be able to see that in the playoffs too? Because you got to believe that Sean McVay and company learned some lessons from what happened as a result of what ended up happening in that matchup. But defensively, it's a cheat code. This was Jalen Phillips' first game on Monday with this team, and he had a huge impact.
Yeah, I mean, that was probably one of the most underrated. It didn't make the headlines that the Sauce Gardner trade made, but that solidified this defense, especially that front. Like, they can get pressure from the middle, they can get pressure from the edge rushers. They are elite on that side of the ball. But just touching back on the AJ Brown situation for a second, it's kind of like for him, they would not trade him because they know what he can do. If he were to get to another situation, they know he'd be an elite wide receiver one in a lot of different situations. So they could not trade him because they know the type of impact he can have. But I think it's more speaking to like the struggles that this offense has had. Even Saquon Barkley does not look the exact same way, which is hard to match what he did last year, being Offensive Player of the Year. It's hard to match that type of production. But they do not look the same. They look out of sync a lot of times. As you know, as great as we say that Jalen Hurts is, you know, he has regressed as well this year. I know that he wins games, and I'm not taking anything away from him, but we're just talking about from a dominant quarterback standpoint. If we told you to go out there and get it, and this is what I feel like Cam Newton was referring to when he said what he said about Jalen Hurts. It has nothing to do with Jalen Hurts himself. It has everything to do with if some of these other elite quarterbacks in the NFL have off games, they are blown out majority of those times. If Jalen Hurts has an off game, you still have certain weapons that you can still point to and say that they can go and win the NFL. They can go win the Philadelphia Eagles a football game. They may not be able to win them a championship, but they can go win a regular season game. This is what he was alluding to, was that Jalen Hurts doesn't have to do some of the same type of level of production as Josh Allen, Pat Mahomes to win a football game because of the amount of weapons that he has. But like I said, this is one of those comments were more of a situation where people were going to attack Cam Newton, not attack what he said, because what he said is proven to be right every single time we see some games like this. It's not more of a Jalen Hurts issue. It's more of a he doesn't have to have it every single game. He can game manage instead of being he doesn't have to lead the charge every single time, is my whole point. He can honestly, dink and dunk his way downfield, and you have an all-pro like Saquon Barkley in the backfield. You can afford to do things like this, but some other quarterbacks are not allowed to do that.
Look, I understand where you're coming from 100%. I understand where Cam Newton was coming from, too. You want to know what the situation that Jalen Hurts is going through right now in Philadelphia honestly reminds me of? It reminds me of Matt Ryan when he was transitioning, going from Kyle Shanahan being his offensive coordinator to Steve Sarkisian being his offensive coordinator. Remember, with Kyle Shanahan, he put up the best numbers and had the best statistical seasons of his career. There was a noticeable drop-off after Kyle Shanahan left to become the head coach of the 49ers. And my question now when it comes to Jalen Hurts is, are you only going to be able to consistently show us that you are one of those cream of the crop quarterbacks when you have elite play calling? Because that's what separates the greats from just the goods and the really goods.
That's fair. That's a fair assessment. And honestly, we look at Jalen Hurts, we look at the back-to-back Super Bowl appearances, the one Super Bowl ring with the Super Bowl MVP. But we also have to look into how he's getting it done. This is one of those situations where if you're barely throwing for 200 yards, you should be criticized. And you shouldn't be criticized for the fact that you won the game. You should be criticized for the fact that you're winning the game, but you don't have to be the main reason for why these games are being won. Jalen Hurts has showed that if I can throw for 150 yards and my team still win, I can't see a Pat Mahomes, a Josh Allen. I can't see even a Matt Stafford winning games like that because they're asked to do so much, and he's not asked to do the same things. But it's not completely his fault. That's just how his team is structured. He has such versatility and dominant weapons around him, and as shout out to Howie Roseman for putting those people around him. But at the same time, we have to understand that quarterbacks are judged off of their individual play, whether we agree is fair or not. They are judged strictly on the fact that they are dominant when it matters and that they can dominate against the league's best. Jalen Hurts has not been dominant this season. He has just not been dominant this season, and that will bring some criticism. And AJ Brown's frustration is a direct result of him not being dominant through the air. I don't, I honestly, I can see AJ Brown trying to force his way into a trade or just forcing the organization's hand by, being unplayable, because I don't see him putting as much effort into it. I know he's a gamer. I'm not saying that he would quit on his team, but I feel like his frustration has reached a boiling point, and for him to go out on, to speak to someone on a live stream shows that he doesn't care about his image anymore, because I feel like the narrative now is going to be painted. AJ Brown would rather get his than win. That's going to be the image painted for him, which is not necessarily fair to say, because if you are a dominant receiver, could you imagine someone like Ocho Cinco in his prime, Ocho Cinco, being open all the time, or not even being open, just knowing that he can get open against his competition and not being given the ball? It's kind of like you have to give those guys the ball, because we know that receivers are going to be like, they're divas, but they are, part of the reason why some of these quarterbacks are successful. So I just see it as, AJ Brown, he's frustrated. He's pretty much done. I don't see it getting any better at this point.
Yeah, I don't either. For that matter, we'll have to wait to see what happens in Philadelphia, because here's the other thing. At some point, you're going to have to start paying some of these young guys, especially on that defensive side of the ball, too. You're going to have to choose, do you pay a Jalen Carter? Do you pay a Nolan Smith? Does Jalen Phillips have a contract coming up that you might want to keep him? Like, they're going to eventually have to pay some guys, because you can't keep going through seasons and losing players at key positions and just trying to fill them up with gap holes. Eventually, it's going to become evident. And eventually, those guys are going to want to get paid. And they should want to get paid, especially for all these contributions to winning. Speaking of winning, the college football playoff rankings are out for the second consecutive week. And the top four remains as it was in week one, KB. Ohio State at 1, Indiana at 2, Texas A&M at 3. Alabama comes in at 4, and Georgia in at number 5. Do you think the committee got it right?
Yeah, absolutely. We're like I've always said since, like, I believe week 7, week 8, I believe that Ohio State and Indiana are the cream of the crop. And I'm sorry, got to show love to Texas A&M as well. I believe that those three teams are the top 3 seeds, no matter how you want to put it. Those are the top 3 seeds, no matter what. Alabama falling right behind at 4 seems correct, because they beat Georgia in the head-to-head matchup. So I'm fine with the top 5. I have no disagreements there. But I did see something that was a question that I did want to ask you, X. It was in one of the college football playoff rankings. I did see a team that I didn't really understand what they had done to deserve or warrant a spot in the college football playoff, but it was the University of Miami. I saw them being ranked at one point in this playoff picture, and I was kind of trying to make sure that it wasn't a joke, because with their schedule, I just didn't see a reason why they should have been in it.
So I think it all has to do with them trying to make sure that they include some form of the ACC in there, because the rule about the committee the past few years since Clemson has fallen off, they don't care about the ACC. So they're trying to make sure some way, somehow they get in there. I don't know if Miami should be the team that represents that conference. I don't know who should represent that. I would say Georgia Tech at this point, but they got a tough matchup coming up at the end of the season against Georgia. And that could potentially have playoff implications on the line for both of those teams, because Georgia's got a tough matchup this weekend coming up against Texas. And Texas seems to have figured some things out, especially Arch Manning. So we'll see what ends up happening there when they go in between the hedges in Athens this weekend to see, is Georgia going to be coming into that Tech game with one loss or two? Like, there's so much that's on the line here. Indiana being ranked 2, I kind of have questions about, though, believe it or not. I question if them and Texas A&M should have flip-flopped, because Indiana, they barely beat Penn State, who was unranked coming into that game last Saturday. Texas A&M goes to Missouri, who was ranked number 22 coming into that game, and they rout them. I don't know if maybe the committee may have been more impressed with the offense's game-winning drive in terms of Indiana, but I thought that there was a possibility that we could have actually saw a flip-flop there with A&M at 2 and Indiana at 3.
And I can see why you said that. And I feel like the committee also wanted to show that there's no SEC bias, that there's been, debate about for the past couple of years since the college football playoff started. I think that they also wanted to, they were impressed by the fact that Indiana was able to lead a game-winning drive to defeat Penn State on the road. I think that was more of the reason why, because like I said, Texas A&M has been dominating. But I think that was more to, in my opinion, that they wanted to show some, non-SEC bias. So they wanted to put, you have now 2 Big Ten schools in as the number 1 and number 2 seed, and then you have 3 SEC schools as the next 3 seeds. So I think that was more of just, remaining non-biased towards the SEC because of, the criticism that they've received in the past as being more favorable towards SEC-related teams.
The rest of that top 12 is rounded out by Texas Tech, Ole Miss, Oregon, Notre Dame, Texas, Oklahoma, and BYU. However, there are 5 conference champions who are guaranteed to make a 12-team bracket. So number 15, Miami, the projected ACC champion, would replace Oklahoma as the 11th seed. And number 24, USF, South Florida, the highest ranked group of 5 champion, would replace BYU as the 12th seed. Now, KB, there was a lot of discussion this week, especially amongst people like Paul Feinbaum, wanting to know, why do we even have USF in this conversation? Now, I will admit, I have a bias when it comes to them right now. I cover them since I live down here in the Southwest Florida and Tampa area, so I want to see them make it. But I do understand where he's coming from in the sense of, we want to see the best competition. And if things were to shake out like this today, they would end up going to Georgia. I don't give USF any chance of going to Athens and beating the Bulldogs. How do you feel about the Bulls being ranked in here with this number 12 seed right now because of being the highest ranked group of 5?
Yeah, that's kind of like where we get into like murky waters, because what is your like criteria? Are we looking at the best available? Are we looking at the best teams? Are we looking at, we're going to reward someone for being a conference champion? Because now we're getting into a point where we're going to bump a deserving team out who, fought hard to be ranked higher in the polls, and we're going to bump them out because of almost like a technicality. Because you are a conference champion or a projected conference champion winner, we are going to bump out a team that I felt like has, fought for their right to be in the college football playoff. So, as much as I love South Florida as a team, especially the way they started off this season, I just don't understand why that the committee would have a criteria where if you're a conference champion, that would automatically get you in over someone who may have been more deserving, who has fought like, BYU has. And, even as far as like Miami, I understand that you want to have an ACC team in. I get that. But is the criteria going to be the 12 best? Or are we just looking at, oh, you won a conference championship, so we're going to put you in a Power 5 conference champion? Is that what if that's what we're doing? I'm not even sure if I look at Miami as being the best in the ACC. The ACC has probably been one of the worst conferences this year. There has been no one besides maybe a Georgia Tech that has stood out for the ACC. And every single one of these ACC teams, especially at the top of the ladder, they've had bad losses. Georgia Tech had just had a bad loss against NC State. Miami has 2 bad losses, one against SMU, and I think the other one was, I believe, against Virginia. So these, this is where I get into it. I'm not really 100% sure that I want, just because you win a conference championship game in a weak conference, that you deserve to be just automatically bumped into the playoffs over teams that may have been more deserving. I'm sorry, I just can't go that far.
That loss actually was against Louisville. My bad on that one too. It wasn't Virginia. They lost to Louisville first. Listen, you're right when you say it's murky waters, because this goes all the way back to, remember when UCF had that great season about 7-8 years ago? And everybody's like, well, why can't they be ranked in the top 5? Why don't we have them ranked in the playoff conversation? And then it got even murkier when they went to a bowl game and they beat a SEC team like Auburn, and they beat them handedly. So, yeah, you want to have the conference champions in there. You want to try to give it to the best 12. But one of the reasons for the playoff expansion was to give teams like USF and things like that at least one shot of being able to get in.
I did want to just ask you a quick question. Which format were you more in favor of? The BCS format, or are you in favor of the 14 playoff or the 12 team? If you had to pick, which one would you be more in favor of?
I'm more in favor of that 14 format. I think that was the best way to go. I know that folks in Tallahassee were crying a couple of years ago about FSU not making it in, but I mean, UGA had a valid argument to be crying about it too. I mean, these were the reigning 2-time champions who had just lost to Alabama, and that was the only loss that we had seen them have in 3 years. Yeah, like, it really proved to be the cream of the crop type of best, because I got to tell you, I don't know how I feel about a team potentially having 3 losses, being able to still have a legit shot to compete for a national championship, when at one point that was absolutely unheard of. And I feel like, at least with the 4-team format, we were still at least getting some of the best brand of college football on Saturdays. NIL has played a factor in this, but the expansion of the 12 teams has also played a factor. Sometimes you can tell these teams out there bull jiving, and they're not really out there giving it their all. You can tell that on some occasions. The only team we haven't really seen it from this season, at least since week 1, is Alabama and Ohio State. They're the only teams I'm going to say that to. You can say Indiana, but I kind of think they were bull jiving on Saturday. There's no way that Penn State should have been able to compete with them, even if this game was in Happy Valley. So I'm going to say the 4-team format, because even with that BCS format, things could get a little tricky too.
Yeah, I think the only real case I could make for the BCS format was there was a consequence for losing back then. Like, one loss could put you out of the entire thing. You would go from a national championship picture to possibly a Sugar Bowl, and that would be your consequence for losing a game. And it could be a close game. Now, with the 14 format, I see what you're saying. I feel like the 12-team format is too many teams. Like, there's a time where I saw, like last year, with SMU versus Penn State. That was a game that I felt like was just, it was unnecessary. It was just felt like that I legit did not feel that SMU had any shot of beating Penn State, first of all, but just being a national championship contender. I understand the record and everything else, and strength of schedule go into it. A lot of these different factors go into it. But it's just the fact that we have too many teams, and we're not going to see the best football, especially in these opening rounds, because you're going to get some matchups that just, honestly, they look bad on paper, and they're going to look bad on the field. Like you said, I don't see a South Florida team as great as they've been this season. I don't see them walking into Athens in the Sanford Stadium and beating UGA. I just don't. I don't even think that they would believe that they would beat UGA. I think this is one of those things where a 14 playoff, as much as we had those teams that were saying that we deserve a spot, there are consequences for your how you play during the season. One thing that we have not heard in a while because of the expansion of the playoff, style wins. How you win matters. How you lose matters. Style points. How much you put up when you're fighting for a playoff spot. How many points can you put up against a great team? These are all things that we haven't heard of in a long time because of the expansion, where there's a little bit more leeway if you do lose 2 games. And this is something that we ain't never really heard of outside of the BCS and the 14 playoff, because honestly, I don't feel like a 2-3 loss team should even have a chance to fight for a championship unless those teams that they lost to were like the cream of the crop. You lose against the anyone in that top 5, or you lose 2 games against anyone in that top 5, your strength of schedule alone should be able to possibly get you a spot to fight for it. But that doesn't necessarily mean you should get in. You should just have a chance to probably get in, but that doesn't necessarily mean you should be in.
You brought up the phrase walking into the stadium, and for some reason that jogged my mind to something really quickly outside of college football. And it's something I want to ask you about, especially you being a youth football coach, because it's something I've been paying attention to the past 2 weekends. When your teams are preparing to play games, when the opposing team is coming to play, what is the latest amount of time that you've seen a team show up before a game?
Honestly, I've seen teams show up with less than 10 minutes before the start of the game. And that just shows, and then I can see why they perform the way they do, just because the lack of preparation. I honestly see why, even from a young age, we say that there's a time that you need to be here, and it needs to be a couple of hours before the game, or at least an hour and a half before the game, because preparation is almost just as important as the actual gameplay on the field. So
the reason I ask you that is because these past 2 weeks, I have been covering high school football playoff games. One 8-man football, one just regular 11-on-11. With the 8-man game I covered last Friday, the team that was the away team showed up with less than 30 minutes until kickoff. And I'm telling the security guard at the gate, because he's like, oh, but they've got some good players over there. They've got some good position players. I'm like, I expect this game to end up being a blowout in favor of the home team that I've been watching warm up for the past 2 hours. The final score in that game was 40-12. Yesterday, I was covering another high school playoff game. This one was 11-on-11. And the team they played, they showed up maybe 45 minutes before kickoff. I was out doing a live shot preparing, and I'm watching just behind me, and I'm like, where is this other team at? Why are they not here yet? And I'm like, okay, they're going to blow them out too. And the final score in that game last night was 75-0 that ended with a forfeit because one of the players on the other team threw a punch out of frustration or whatever. I don't know why he did it, but the team ended up forfeiting, and that was the final score. I was just curious to know if we were aligned with what it is that you just said, which we are 100%. I don't understand why on some of these lower levels of football, these teams are not showing up to these games prior to the proper amount of time that they need for preparation. You need to be able to stretch. You need to be able to walk through a little before you need to be able to do certain things. And it's like, that's not happening. And you're absolutely right. It's leading to some terrible football.
And it's starting from a young age. This is why sometimes I don't advocate for kids to play travel ball and some things like this, because they're teaching them bad habits early on. They're teaching them, if you're in college or you're in the NFL, if they don't even show up to a game right before the game starts, what makes you think that you are able to do that? And y'all are nowhere in any position to do that. And all of this falls on, like I said, the coaches. Some coaches aren't really mentors. And I feel like that has to do a lot with, the success of some of these guys, because you always see a lot of these NFL players, they shout out some of the coaches that they may have had in high school, they may have had from Pee Wee football, Pop Warner, all this stuff. They're shouting them out for building that work ethic from an early age to show that they have, that they come to work when they come on that field. But also, your preparation has to also do with your play on the field. You fail to prepare, you prepare to fail. I mean, we've been hearing that for forever. Like, this is one of those things that no matter if you're in high school, little league, college, NFL, semi-pro, it doesn't matter. If you don't show up with enough time to warm up, I ain't never seen a guy show up and dominate unless he's just like that generational talent that we've never seen before. I've never seen a guy just show up, no warm up, no like type of time to run through anything and just dominate a game. I haven't seen it. And you see how it turns out on the field. Those blowouts that you just described is indicative of the fact that they just showed up with barely enough time to even change and get into their uniforms. So I'm not surprised.
It honestly makes me question if some of those teams that show up that late, have you already mentally just decided to quit and you're just going out there to play? You feel like you don't have a shot of beating this other team? Because teams that are showing up that late, that makes no sense to me. And I've also heard the same, well, it's a school day and the guys have class. I remember when we were in high school, our team would go to Valdosta and they would play against Lowndes, and maybe they would stay for the first period of the day, maybe until the second period. After that, they were loading up on the buses to get on that trip and go down there. And it's only about a 4.5 hour trip from Covington to Valdosta, maybe 5 hours at most. But if you're leaving at 10 in the morning and you're getting there like 5 hours later, per se, you're at least getting there by, well, you got to throw a bathroom break or somewhere in there. So let's say you get there, let's say you have 6 hours. You're still getting there at least at 4 p.m. for a game that usually wouldn't kick off until 7 or 7:30 in the evening. You're still giving yourself enough preparation time.
Yeah, and I think that honestly that would fall on the school for lack of preparation, not factoring in the logistics of how long it would take to get there, and then factoring in certain things such as like stoppages, like for bathroom breaks, lunch, that kind of stuff. I look at the school as they have to, accept the fault for that. And I'm sure, somebody may have already, reported them for what they did, because there's no way that I have never heard of that. I've never heard of a high school team, especially for a playoff game, leaving and then arriving 30 minutes prior to a game kicking off. I have never seen that. So that to me just shows that the school was not, they weren't up on game as far as being prepared to have the team travel, arrive, warm up, any of those things. Nothing went into that preparation process. So that is a complete utter fail.
To our audience, I just want you to know that part of our conversation was not planned, but KB said something and it honestly just jogged me, because it's like, I've been seeing this for the past 2 weekends and I just want to know, is this something of the norm? And unfortunately, it's discouraging to hear that this is something that is of the norm and is leading to some of the things that we're seeing from the smallest levels to football into some of the bigger levels of football. We got to get to some quick hitters really quickly. Let's take it out to the diamond. Ohtani and Judge going back to back, man. AL and NL MVPs for the second consecutive year. Ohtani, unanimous MVP, fourth MVP in the past 5 years. He won 2 in the AL, now 2 in the NL. Aaron Judge edging out Cal Riley. I'm sure this one was controversial for a lot of folks, to win his second straight AL MVP and third overall. Do you feel like the voters got this one right?
I think that the voters got the NL MVP right. I was one of those people that was advocating for Cal Raleigh to win MVP just because of the historic season he had and the fact that the success of the Mariners, because the Mariners have not historically been the greatest franchise. They've had certain seasons where they've shown success, but like certain things are expected of the Yankees, certain things are expected of the Dodgers. I think that there was expectations for the Yankees to be back in the World Series. I think there were expectations for the Dodgers to be back in the World Series. No one saw this season that the Mariners had coming, and Cal Raleigh was a big reason for why they had the success they had. I would have loved to see Cal Raleigh, because these type of years don't just come around very often for teams and for certain players. I think that he deserved it. I think he did enough to deserve it. That doesn't take anything away from Aaron Judge. I think Aaron Judge is a hell of a player. I think that we've kind of gotten used to his dominance, just the same way we've gotten used to Ohtani's dominance. I just would have loved to see, an underdog win it, just because I felt like that he came into the season with not much buzz around him, but he showed them that he's a hell of a player. Seattle could be a hell of a team, going forward. But this was the year that I felt like Cal Raleigh deserved it.
I agree with you on that from the standpoint of he did something that we've never seen a catcher do as well. It's tough because Aaron Judge did have a phenomenal season. So had they gone, they honestly would have had some folks feeling like it was controversial no matter which way they went with it. The only folks who were upset in the National League about Ohtani winning are Phillies fans that thought that Kyle Schwarber was going to get it, and I could have told you that wasn't going to happen. Speaking of folks who went back to back, Tariq Skubal, back to back AL Cy Young winner, no doubt. This is exactly what should have happened.
Yeah, man. Me and you are actually talking about this, but I don't know if this is just a rumor. I don't know how legitimate these reports are, but he definitely deserved that back-to-back Cy Young. I am in a complete agreement. But if the Dodgers do choose to target him in free agency, man, as a fan, I'll be so disappointed because there's a potential chance that he could be a Dodger coming into next season. And that's the scary part about it. You're only making it even better for the Dodgers. Like, the fact that this is why I said that I'm going to be an advocate for a salary cap in baseball. I know it may not happen. I could see a lockout possibly, but I don't see, I don't see it happening. But this is the reason why I'm advocating for it, because we just saw a World Series where you had a guy come in off of 0 days rest and completely dominate to win the World Series. You're talking about adding a back-to-back, possibly adding a back-to-back Cy Young winner. This is why I said this is unheard of. They are basically the evil empire now. They are present-day evil empire. What they thought that what people perceived the Yankees to be back in the day, that is what the Dodgers are right now. They are the evil empire, and if they make a move like this, hey, look out. That's what I'm saying. Just look out.
I just want to know how they keep doing it, because you realize that Yoshi Yamamoto probably wouldn't even have been a Dodger if Trevor Bauer hadn't had the stuff go down with him that went down.
That is 100% true, and he's still campaigning to get his shot back in Major League Baseball. But that is a very good point, and I don't think a lot of people realize what Trevor Bauer was when he was in the Major League Baseball. Like, that was one of the top 5 pitchers in the world at that point right then. So if it wasn't for the allegations, he would still be here. He would still be possibly dominating as a Dodger. So yeah, that was a very good point, X. I had to give you a kudos on that because a lot of people don't remember that.
And there's so many other moves that the Dodgers have made over the years too, even outside of pitching. I remember in 2018 they traded for Manny Machado. They didn't keep him. Then they had Corey Seager. They end up not keeping him. They have Trey Turner. They end up not keeping him. Like, they had Cody Bellinger. They end up not keeping him. Now, he had started to fall off a little at that point too, but he had been a National League MVP with them. Like, this has been a well-oiled machine of an organization since at least the 2013 season. Since at least 2013, they have not had a year where they have not won at least a minimum of 90 games. And it looks like there's no end to it anywhere in sight. Giving back to more award winners here, Paul Skeens winning his first Cy Young award. Well earned for him. I'm honestly glad that this happened, because if he had any type of batting order or offense with him in Pittsburgh, he would have won more games than he did.
Yeah, you seen the dominance from the start of the season to the end. Like you said, he didn't get much support from his offense. But him on the individual level, yeah, he's been one of the best pitchers since he's come into the league. And honestly, it was well deserved. I don't think that you really could make a case that he shouldn't have won. But yeah, I think that Paul Skeens is definitely gonna, be a great pitcher, possibly a top 5 pitcher in the league for years to come.
Falcons quarterback Michael Penix Jr. made headlines this week when he went to the podium during a press conference and mentioned that he does not get the help that he feels that he should be getting from the sidelines. He mentioned how other previous coaches in his life have offered him more advice so far through this journey than what he's getting with the Falcons. Well, I'd like to say that I'm surprised by that, but I'm not. And we see it by the up and down play that we see week in and week out.
Yeah, and it's kind of disappointing because you have a veteran quarterback like Kirk Cousins behind you that you should feel like would offer you that type of advice. But I can honestly see it by the gameplay on the field. Like there's been nothing about this season that's shown that Michael Penix has taken any type of like leap. And like I said, this is kind of one of those things where I don't want to harp on it too much because he really is in his first year of starting. So I will honestly look at him like this is a rookie quarterback still trying to figure things out. But the fact that he has come out publicly and said that he is not getting any help from any coaches, from any other players, that he's not getting advice on what he needs to do to be a successful starting quarterback in this league is honestly disappointing. And that's also indicative of what the Falcons have been this season and what they have been for the better part of our existence, at least, that they are not a great run franchise. They just have not been. How do you have a quarterback that you invested a high draft pick in and you are not offering anything, any assistance, any type of thing to help him progress? I think that's disappointing because I believe if Michael Penix had a great OC, somebody that has seen it all and done it all, somebody like Kyle Shanahan, could you imagine what Michael Penix would look like with Kyle Shanahan? I guarantee you, we was even in his first year, you would see something that would be like, wow, like he is next up. But I'm not surprised with this coaching staff. I don't see anybody helping this guy out, and it's really disappointing because I still believe in Michael Penix, but I don't believe in this coaching staff to help him progress to the level that he needs to be a great starting quarterback in this league. I just don't see it.
Yeah, that's why I said at the beginning of this that it's still a question mark for the most part. I'm hopeful they can try to get the right coaching staff in there with him, but honestly, I don't know what the front office and the ownership of the Falcons is doing at this point. It's been downhill for this organization since the infamous Super Bowl 51 and 28-3. Hopefully, things can get turned around. An end of an era coming. Steph Curry and Under Armour cutting ties. He has been the face of that brand for more than a decade now and really helped put them on the map. He is now going to continue to go forward with the Kory brand, and I'm looking forward to seeing what it is that he's going to be able to do with his own brand, KB.
Yeah, like Kory being with Under Armour was just synonymous just like how LeBron was synonymous with Nike. It was just one of those guys that he was a stalemate for them for so long. We would have never thought that this day would have come. But honestly, I am interested to see how he goes forward with the Kory brand and what type of products that they're going to be able to release. I do want to see I'm actually glad that I don't have to see him come out with any more of those hospital shoes that he had a couple years back. I was good on those. I don't know about you, X, but those were some of the ugliest shoes I had ever seen in my life. They look like those generic 2K shoes that we usually see. I did not like those shoes at all, but he was just, like I said, he was a driving force for making Under Armour what they are now, especially from a basketball standpoint. So now I'm interested to see how does Under Armour recover from this and how does the Kory brand move forward now not having that partnership anymore.
Those shoes were ugly, but I guarantee you it was somebody who was out there buying them.
Yeah, you might have had a few uncles and grandpas. It kind of like I said, hospital shoes. They would be great if you were working a 12-hour shift. I just don't know if you would want to go on the basketball court and wear those. I personally couldn't even see myself wearing those out just playing with my friends. I feel like I'd be judged from the minute I put them on. So I'm not wearing them, but I can see somebody in the average age of between 50 and 65 wearing them.
Reminds you of that episode of Martin where he went out there with a certain pair of shoes, getting ready to go out there on the court. The minute he stepped out the door, dudes comes on. I don't know what those are. You ain't going to me looking like that with those on. Immediately came back into the door. Man. So, I mean, I can see where you're coming from. Hey, look, all athletes, they got at least one ugly shoe out there. I mean, it's a pair of Jordans out there that I'm looking at like, yeah, I'm not wearing those, even though it's got the Jumpman logo on them.
Oh yeah, Jordan some bad ones, LeBron some bad ones, Kobe has them, KD has, everybody has them. Like it's just though, but with the Jordan brand, the Nike brand with LeBron, you are given so much leeway now because of what you have presented to the public. Curry didn't get that type of he didn't get that type of leeway with those shoes. I mean, from the minute that they were unveiled, they were judged off rip. I remember being on Twitter that day. I remember it was the ugliest scene that I have seen because of the fact that those shoes, if you remember, like I said, I hate to keep saying it, but the 2K generated shoes that they give every my player when they start out, those what those shoes reminded me of. And you cannot convince me otherwise. Those shoes were bad. They never need to be spoken about again. But those shoes were some of the worst shoes I've ever seen in my life.
All right, that's gonna do it for part one of the One Not Us, One Not Now podcast. We'll be right back with part two because we got to get into some things that shook up the NBA world this week, including the termination in Dallas that fans have been clamoring for the past 9 months. It's X, it's KB. We're coming at you. We'll be right back.